Time moves slowly for those who wait and too fast for those who rush. But for the patient, time is a quiet companion. It teaches, shapes, and softens what we once thought was unchangeable. Like a potter's wheel turning under steady hands, life spins us through moments of fire and stillness until we find our true form. In the small mountain town of Nara, Japan, where mist drifts between cedar trees and the river hums like a distant song, there lived a man named Akio. He was a potter known for his precision, his silence, and his clay that never cracked. To many, he was the image of calm mastery. But inside his heart, the silence had grown heavy. He wondered if patience still mattered in a world that rewarded speed. This is the story of Akio, and the quiet strength he discovered in waiting. Every morning, before the sun reached the peaks around Nara, Akio would open the wooden doors of his small pottery workshop. Oh, the scent of earth and smoke welcomed him like an old friend. His hands, rough from decades of shaping clay, moved with memory more than motion. The wheel began to spin. The soft hum of it was the rhythm of his life. Akio was 45, a quiet man who believed that perfection came only to those who waited. Clay, he often said to himself, has its own time. He believed that patience was not weakness, but wisdom, the kind that made fire gentle and form last forever. Around him, the world was changing. New shops sold glossy, factory-made cups that looked flawless but felt empty. Tourists bought them without thought. Riku, his young apprentice, often told him, "Sensei, if we made them faster, we could sell more." Akio would just smile, wipe the dust from his hands, and whisper, "Beauty is born slow." But lately, even that belief began to tremble. Orders were fewer. Bills piled higher. His work, once admired, now looked old-fashioned. He still shaped clay every morning, yet something inside him had hardened. Beneath his calm routine, a quiet doubt began to form, like a hairline crack in the surface of a pot, invisible at first, but growing with every turn of the wheel. That summer, the orders stopped coming. The shopkeepers who once waited weeks for Akio's bowls now turned to cheaper ones from Kyoto. Their shelves were full of things that looked perfect, but felt soulless. Yet people wanted what was easy to buy, not what took time to create. Akio tried to keep his rhythm. Every morning, he sat before the spinning wheel, pressing his palms into the soft clay. But his hands, once sure, began to tremble. He pushed the wheel faster, hoping speed would quiet the doubt whispering in his chest. Maybe I have been too slow. Maybe patience no longer fits this world. The clay collapsed beneath his fingers, folding in on itself. He stared at the ruined shape, and for the first time in years, felt anger rise. He threw the clay aside. Again and again, he tried, shaping, pressing, forcing. Each piece cracked in the kiln or warped before it dried. The more he fought, the worse it became. His patience, once his pride, now felt like a chain. One evening, as the sun sank behind the mountains, Riku approached him. "Sensei," he said softly, "maybe you should rest." Akio didn't answer. He kept the fire burning through the night. Smoke filled the small workshop. His eyes stung, but he refused to stop. He thought that effort could still save him. But effort without calm becomes desperation. And desperation breaks what it touches. When morning came, he opened the kiln door. The pots were ruined, cracked, blistered, broken. The fire that was meant to shape them had destroyed them instead. He stood there for a long time, staring into the ashes. Around him, silence grew heavy. There is a truth every craftsman must face. When the heart rushes, even skill becomes brittle. Another truth follows close behind. Perfection built on fear will always shatter. Akio walked outside. The air smelled of burnt clay and smoke. He sat on the wooden step, hands blackened, breath uneven. For the first time, the sound of the river below that didn't soothe him. It only reminded him how far he had drifted from peace. Behind him, the kiln's flame flickered one last time, then went out. The room dimmed, and in the fading light, a half-finished pot lay cracked on the table, its surface split, its form unfinished. The kind of break no hand could repair. Days turned into weeks. The fire in Akio's kiln stayed cold. Every morning, he walked into his workshop, touched the edge of the empty wheel, and sat in silence. Dust began to gather on the shelves where his pots once stood. He cleaned them each day, only to watch the same dust return by nightfall. It was his quiet ritual, his way of pretending that something still lived inside this stillness. Sometimes, he would pick up a piece of broken clay from the table, turning it in his hands until his fingers turned gray. What if I had stopped sooner? What if I had listened to Riku? He whispered to no one. The questions circled like birds trapped in a room. They had nowhere to go, and neither did he. He stopped visiting the market, to sit. He stopped answering the door. Even the sound of the river, once his peace, became distant noise. His days felt like the same loop of silence. Wake, stare, remember, regret. At night, the moonlight spilled across the unfinished pot on his table, the one that had cracked. It gleamed faintly, as if mocking him. One afternoon, while sitting outside, Akio saw Riku passing by with a small box of newly made cups. Simple, plain, but selling well in the nearby town. The young man bowed politely and said, "Sensei, the people in the city like these now. They don't mind if they're imperfect." Akio nodded but didn't answer. Riku hesitated, then asked, "But tell me, Sensei, when you make something, how do you know when it's finished?" The question lingered after the boy left. The wind stirred the ashes inside the kiln, sending a thin wisp of gray smoke into the air. Akio stared at it until it disappeared. For the first time in months, he realized he didn't know anymore. The silence that once gave him peace had become his prison. And maybe, he thought, it was time to open the door. That evening, the rain returned to Nara. It fell softly, tapping against the old roof tiles like a familiar melody. Akio sat inside his quiet workshop, watching the droplets slide down the window pane. He hadn't touched the wheel in weeks. The air smelled of damp earth and faint smoke, the scent of things that once held fire but now only remembered it. He reached for a wooden chest tucked beneath the workbench. It was covered in dust. Inside lay old sketches, broken brushes, and a small bowl wrapped in cloth, one of his very first pieces, made under his teacher's guidance decades ago. Its glaze was uneven, its rim slightly warped. It was far from perfect, but when he held it, the weight of it felt honest, human, alive. He remembered his teacher's words, spoken long ago on a night much like this one. The clay doesn't rush to become strong. It hardens only when it's ready. Akio ran his fingers along the rough edge of the bowl. He saw every mistake he had made back then. And yet, it had survived. While the flawless pieces from recent years had shattered, this imperfect one remained whole. He realized something he had forgotten. Patience was never about standing still. It was about staying true through the slow fire of time. The wheel, the clay, the waiting. They weren't delays. They were the process itself. Outside, the rain began to ease. A faint breeze slipped him through the half-open door, brushing his face like a whisper. He stood, set the bowl on the table, and for the first time in months, reached for the clay again. He didn't rush. He didn't plan. He simply began. His hands, hesitant at first, found rhythm in the quiet. The wheel turned slowly, steadily, like a heartbeat rediscovered. And in that sound, soft, consistent, alive, Akio knew the fire within him had never truly gone out. It had only been waiting for him to listen. The next morning, The mist hung low over Nara. The air was cool, the kind that carried both silence and promise. Akio stepped into his workshop, the wooden floor creaking softly beneath his feet. He looked at the wheel, the same wheel that had sat untouched through seasons of doubt, and placed his hands on its edge. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, with a deep breath, he began to turn it, slowly, gently. The sound was faint at first, like a whisper. The clay, cold and rough, resisted his touch. But he didn't force it this time. He let it breathe. He let it find its rhythm with his. This was his hesitant beginning. A single, quiet step towards something that had no name yet. The first few days were clumsy. The clay collapsed often. Sometimes it cracked before it could dry. Other times, he ruined it by being too careful. Yet, for the first time in years, the failures didn't anger him. They humbled him. Every mistake reminded him of what his teacher once said. The clay doesn't rush to become strong. Each morning, he returned to the wheel. The repetition became his prayer. Turn, press, release. Again and again. His muscles ached, his palms burned, but there was something honest in the ache. Something alive. Truth moment 1. Growth hides inside repetition. The ordinary day is where transformation begins. Outside, the rain that had fallen for days began to fade. The roof still dripped, but the sound felt softer now, almost musical. Riku came by sometimes, curious but quiet. He would watch in silence as Akio shaped the clay, slower than before but steadier. One afternoon, Riku asked, "Sensei, aren't you afraid it will break again?" Akio smiled without looking up. "Everything breaks, Riku, but not everything is lost." The days grew longer, filled with small victories, a bowl that held its shape, a cup that dried smooth, a glaze that caught the morning light just right. He still failed often, but now failure felt like a teacher, not an enemy. The workshop began to fill again, not with noise, but with purpose. Truth moment 2. Patience is not waiting for life to change. It is changing quietly while life waits. Weeks passed. The rhythm of his days became steady. The soft hum of the wheel, the hiss of wet clay, the faint crackle of fire from the kiln. His hands, once uncertain, now moved with quiet confidence. He spoke less, smiled more. There was peace in the doing, not in the outcome. One morning, he opened the kiln and found a bowl so simple, yet so whole, that it stopped him. Its color was uneven, a soft ivory mixed with pale gray, the kind of imperfection that made it feel alive. He held it gently, turning it under the sunlight that streamed through the open door. It wasn't flawless, but it was honest. It was enough. He placed the bowl on a wooden shelf beside the old one. The first he had ever made. 2 imperfect pieces, decades apart, standing side by side. One from youth, born of ambition. One from wisdom, born of patience. Truth moment 3. Perfection fades, honesty endures. From then on, the workshop changed. Not in appearance, but in energy. People from the village started visiting again, not for flawless pottery, but for the calm that seemed to live inside the room. They said his bowls carried warmth, as if each one held a piece of his quiet heart. Riku returned as an apprentice once more. This time, Akio didn't teach through words. He taught through silence, through the steady rhythm of the wheel, through the kind of example only time can make real. Truth moment 4. The best teachers don't tell you how to live. They show you how to endure. And so, the days continued. Slow, deliberate, alive. The rain came and went. Seasons turned. Akio no longer counted the hours. He no longer feared the cracks, because he understood now. The purpose of clay was never to last forever. It was to be shaped, broken, and shaped again. Just like the human heart. Number 1. Patience is not waiting. It is working quietly when no one is watching. Akio learned that the fire inside the kiln does not shape the clay faster just because he wants it to. It shapes it in its own time. And life works the same way. When we try to rush it, we only crack what was meant to become strong. Number 2, perfection is not the goal. Honesty is. The first bowl Akio ever made was crooked, uneven, and flawed. It had lasted longer than all the pieces he once called perfect. What stays is not what looks smooth to others, but what is built with truth in our hands. Number 3, growth lives inside repetition. Every day, Akio sat before the wheel and did the same thing. Turn, press, release. It looked like nothing changed, yet everything did. The small, quiet acts we repeat become the rhythm that transforms us. Number 4, failure is not a punishment. It is a teacher. Every crack in Akio's pottery taught him something the flawless pieces never could. Success feeds pride, but failure feeds wisdom. The fire that destroys can also teach us how to endure. Number 5, silence is not emptiness. It is space for listening. When Akio stopped fighting his mistakes, he began to hear what the clay had been trying to tell him all along. In life, silence is not where we lose our voice. It is where we finally hear it. Number 6, true mastery begins with humility. When Akio started over, he did not seek praise or profit. He simply wanted to make something honest again. Greatness is never loud. It grows quietly in the shadows of discipline and time. Number 7, patience is love. In slow motion. It is how we treat the things we care about, our work, our dreams, the people we hold close. To be patient is to believe that what's meant to grow will grow, even if it takes longer than we hoped. In the end, Akio's story reminds us that we are all clay in the hands of time. We can resist, or we can allow the shaping to happen. Either way, the fire will come. But only those who trust the process will emerge whole. In some way, we are all like Akio. We rush to shape our lives, to make them smooth and perfect, forgetting that the beauty of clay lies in its waiting. We grow impatient when things do not take form fast enough. But time, like the wheel, turns at its own pace. And the fire of life, it tests us not to destroy, but to reveal what was meant to last. There will be seasons when our work breaks, when our hearts crack, when silence feels heavier than words. Yet somewhere in that stillness, something begins again. A softer strength, a quieter faith. Patience is not weakness. It is courage with steady hands. So, when your own days feel slow, remember Akio and his wheel. Remember that even the smallest turn forward is still movement. Keep shaping. Keep believing. The masterpiece of your life is still becoming. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs its light. And if you wish to walk with us through more stories of hope and healing, subscribe. We will meet again, here, under the same quiet light.